All right, we're just waiting for one more member to come in person so that we have a quorum. All right, let's all clap when Samantha gets in.
All right.
All right. Oh, thank God. Yay.
I forgot my shoes.
Nobody
Nobody
know
was
what you're here.
My children needed their backpacks and their picnic baskets and their books before they would stay to grandma's house this morning.
Oh,
I apologize.
So you absolutely should. Please, let's look more comfortable than the shoes I'm in.
Well, your penalty for being 3 minutes late is that you have to chair the meeting.
Seriously?
Yeah, Craig's not here. You can do it. You
I also
can.
have to leave early. So that means
Well,
I should
We
also
have a
chair
hard
very
stop at
fast.
9:50.
Well, please, don't take it.
Okay, I have no idea how to chair a meeting here, so.
Just like any other
Oh,
meeting.
Meeting to order,
Mhm.
take attendance.
Yep, meeting to order 9:04. And we'll do, I guess, introductions. First,
I'm Samantha Miller Herrera. I am the vice president.
Jacobs, Berkshire Farm.
Bill Connors, probation department.
Mark Castiglione.
Kristen Singh, on the phone.
Laura Bauer, Rensselaer County.
Anyone start? Suki Stanton, Saratoga County.
Lee Baker building. Michael in the building.
Thank you. First order of business
First order of business.
is actually not adopting the January 18th meeting because we did not have a meeting. It's December 22nd, so just note that on the agenda. I don't think so. Just the corrections noted verbally during the meeting.
Meeting minutes from the December 21st, 2022 meeting. Everyone get a chance to look at them. Any corrections or anything that needs to be made. Vote would not come.
Mhm.
A motion on the debt motion.
Second.
Aye. All against. Motion passes.
Oh, geez. 3 people in the waiting room.
Next, we have the financial statements for March 30th, 2022, memo 23-03.
Sure. Well, we wrapped up, we are still in the process of wrapping up and getting a rate for Q4 2022. And just got some clarifications back from Berkshire, and I think this week we'll be reporting those out so we get the final quarterly rate for the year. We've dispersed Amy quarters 1 and 3 to Berkshire, but not Q2, or have we done all 3? Okay, quarters 1 through 3 have been dispersed to Berkshire for operations payments. Through February, the reported expenses for SD is operations is just about 514. Total expenses for SD is 537. SSD is slightly higher, operations being 743 and total 766. We will be obviously working to close Q1 expenses as soon as possible so that we can get a rate set to start billing it out for Q1 2023. Any questions? Oh, and the financials, we have not yet reviewed the 2021 audit, but I've been promised by our auditing firm that it'll be done in time for June.
In a motion to accept the financial statements through March 30th, 2022. Make that motion. Second. Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next, we have raise the H capital project update, memo 23-04.
Yeah, we have lucky to have Mike and Nate here. Mike is sort of the grandfather of the project, been working with him for about a year. Wrestling it into form for the bid documents, and Nate taking the reins to wrangle all the early construction guys out on site. So we're in good hands with Gil Bain managing the project, and I'll just bring up this presentation and share my screen. And they're going to walk us through what's going on at the site and take a look at some of the challenges and just, walk us through the timeline when things are going to come online and things will be completed. So just give me a second here. Can everyone online see the screen? Thumbs up?
Yes, I can see it.
Great.
Okay, well, good morning. Mike Delimo with Gilbane with the construction managers from the county on this great project. Dave Baker is running the day out. Job, collaboration with each other. That's just an aerial tutorial of the finished project plus or minus showing the new additions, courtyard, grading work, etc. It's a nice visual that SMRT, the design team, had prepared. Let's go next slide. This is a snapshot overview. The projects was designed and completed late last fall and every period. Bids received, went through the descoping recommendations through all the proper approval channels, and contracts eventually issued here in the early part of 2023. We broke it up with some visuals and a couple of big milestones. A lot of upfront work took place at the beginning of the year with regards to submittals, approvals, et cetera. That will continue a little bit more for the next few months here. For all the major items like major equipment, structural steel that's been reviewed, approved, and ordered. Contractors began mobilization here in March when the weather broke. Everything from doing site prep, wood cutting down trees at an expanded parking lot area, temporary fencing, et cetera. The next big milestone we'll start to see on site will be the start of foundations for the additions. Primarily, there are 3 or 4 additions. There's a new housing bod, Sally Port, and admin, and the fourth being nurses and sampling area with a bump out. Those activities will continue through this year and into early part of next year in phase turnovers for the facility. And then we start in sections, you can see the timelines there, start renovating into some portions of the existing facility. Ultimately completing in March of 2025. Just pausing there for a moment. The project has been great. You'll see that with Boucher. There are many agencies, many partners here. Not an easy project, but existing facilities, and everyone's been working great. So I really appreciate that. We have a great team here.
We have a lot of bosses that we have to get approval from.
It's gone pretty well. Next slide here. And we have Nate walk us through a couple highlight the phasing.
Yeah, the phase one is kind of the new addition, so the Sally Port. Visitation or the admin wing and the new pod. So we're starting those in the next month or so with the completion early next year. That'll cue the transition from pod C residents to pod B. Move some people around so we can start some renovations in the existing spaces for phase 2. And then again, another shift for our phase 2 renovations to close out everything. So challenges, risks, so the facility is occupied, so maintaining health, safety and security, so there's the egress, but also the protocols inside the facility. So just day-to-day access to the building, even just outside of the building, but also inside the building for protecting tools and personnel in and out, but also maintaining the security that this team have in place. Some logistics. The site overall is pretty small, so just keeping the construction team working as efficiently as possible, not bringing loads of material and clogging up the site, so keeping everything efficiently moving, but also making sure that next area, that next phase of work is work. So getting approvals and make sure that the on-site is key lab, but this is
Yeah, I'd like to thank Luke for being responsive to the various requests from the contractors and think creatively about solutions. Everything that you see designed on paper, it's a very different thing when they're talking about how we're actually going to build it. So seems like everything and every week we have another major thing that requires, a lot of people to talk about it. But the process has been going relatively well. So, like Mike said, it's a good team. So we're lucky to have them.
Just a quick update on where we're at over the last month or so. So mobilization, building and the trailer out there a couple of times, that trailers out there. We started clearing trees on the new parking lot expansion. And doing some site work out there. There's a temp rec area that we're installing, completing, which will open up kind of the area for the new additions to begin in the next few weeks. And then the next slide, those. So the upper left is kind of pre-construction prior to any work starting, and then off to the right there, some tree cutting removals for that parking lot expansion and some other, kind of on-site activities. The next couple of weeks, we'll be starting some site removal and get into those, additions and foundation work.
Right. So, it's a really tight site, and if you go there, you see cars, stacked up like cordwood around the site for the construction people and the staff of the facility. And it's going to be sort of in that condition for the next couple of years. One of the next big things that we're gonna be doing is constructing the temporary sally port in the front of the building. So that construction can start on the permanent sally port expansion on the back side of the building. And all these things, these changes, the temporary rec yard, taking interior spaces offline, require Luke to go to the agencies and get waivers for operations. So, it's not only getting approvals from Albany County as the, contract holder, but also seeking approvals from the State Commission of Corrections, OCFS, sheriff. So there's a lot of people role mapped into the process to okay and sign off on every change or operational impact that occurs. But I'm glad it's happening. It's been a long time coming, and we certainly need the space. Anything else on the project there, gentlemen?
I think those are the highlights. Again, actually getting into the flow of things and visual milestones, foundations going in, and then some part of some of the civil services of the structural still that really define the conditions of it. So,
Any questions from those on the phone?
I don't have any, Mark.
Thanks, Craig.
No questions?
Thanks, guys.
Now we'll move on to agenda item number 5, facilities.
So facility use has been hovering around 22, 23. We had some female bed space opened up, but 3 female beds have pretty much been occupied for the first, and they are today. Yeah, Schenectady County or Albany County keeps them full. We do have a queue with several counties making reservations for those 3 beds. But it's extremely a full facility, but thankfully Luke has now a staff to adequately keep the facility operating within ratio reliably, which has been a big thing that we've been building towards. And just as a reminder, what really started moving the needle on that was the 20% increase to frontline staff for salaries. I sent around that email yesterday about the budget proposal related to people that work with at-risk youth. Thank you, Luke, for writing that op-ed for the Times Union. So I'd just encourage anybody to advocate for that increase because the more people that we have working with at-risk youth, the less youth that we'll see in our facility, which is overall a good thing. But the governor's proposal, as I mentioned in my email, really only contemplates a 2.5% increase for those workers, and that was nowhere near going to move the needle for attracting and retaining staffers for those kinds of positions. And guys, if you have somewhere else to go, you don't have to stay. But you're more than welcome to stay.
Something else in facility use? Questions? If not, I will give a motion to enter into executive session.
Make that motion.
Second.
All right. I'm gonna have to put people in breakout rooms here.
Thank you.
Take it easy.
Mark, what do I put to discuss?
Legal matters. So I need to
name after this?
Uh, All right, we're back in the main section.
Our next agenda item is health services evaluation. of 22.
Right, this is, a standard arm of compliance that SCOC comes in and evaluates the policies and procedures of the facility and how they're being implemented or not. So they conducted one of these evaluations at the end of 22. Noting some deficiencies in terms of the regulations. Berkshire responded to it. And then was another correspondence from SCOC leaving some items open. So do you want to walk us through that health evaluation?
Sure. So this health evaluation is going to be done in all secure detentions across the state. We were the first one to have it done with us. On the positive side, there were no red flags that came up with our health services. There were some things that needed to be fixed that we did move forward on. They had a couple policy questions that they wanted us to adjust some policies, which we are working with our risk management team to adjust those policies so they still comply with those CFS standards. And then those will be resubmitted to SCOC. But those are the last issues. Any of the physical issues were corrected immediately that day. And we are working on our last few policy concerns there.
And those communications from SCOC are included in your packet.
Yes.
Any questions?
What's the timeline for updating these policies?
We will have that done by the end of the day.
Any other questions? Move on. Next agenda item is the monitoring progress reports.
Yeah, we're still under heightened monitoring. We've requested specifically from OCFS, what's the glide paths that come off the heightened monitoring? They're a bit wishy-washy about that. We still have our monthly check-in meetings. But Luke and his team have really brought the facility back up to where it needs to be in terms of staffing and compliance, as I mentioned before. But you want to run down some of the things that are going on?
Sure. As we started, when we started back in March of last year, we were on weekly visits, site monitoring visits, where OCFS came in every week with SCOC. Currently, we're on every 3 weeks where they come in to review. In the past 4 months, all of our monitoring reports have showed that we were in our 3 areas: staffing levels, programming, and security, that we were in compliance and running as we should be running. Our last report, which I have been able to see, is from last week. As far as our staffing levels, we showed above staffing needs in all required dorm areas, so we were above the minimum. In fact, the minimum was 2, and we had between 4 and 5 in all of our units. We've had a positive and calm tone throughout, and we are recruiting. It's noted our recruiting efforts, which I'll talk a little bit more about in my UC update. Last week, our program, it was school break, and we were also in our 6th COVID outbreak, but we were able to contain. We only had 3 youth and 5 staff. So our programming was a little off where it was normally be when they came last week, but they noted that our medical staff was taking care of all the youth who had any COVID issues. And we had one young man who was having a huge problem with programming, and so we got very creative. We actually programmed him with females during the day. He did great. And now he's actually back in regular programming this week. So they noted that we got creative with our programming. As far as security, everything was sanitary. Everything's cleaned out. We do have a cleaner who comes in once a month and does a deep clean of the facility. We have a janitor, as well as bringing on a maintenance man. All the doors in the facility are functioning well now. We do check them to make sure, and both security is there immediately if we have any issues. As you know, a lot of our stuff is old. It's going to be all replaced. So we have had Wolf out there pretty much every 2 weeks, just checking on, maintaining things, making sure things are working well. And also they talked about our temporary recreation space, which in fact was completed yesterday. So we'll have Sean in the sheriff's department to check it out and approve it so that we can move forward using it. And they also noted that as far as the construction stuff going on, that we're maintaining security between construction and youth so that the youth are safe and don't have to worry about anything wrong.
Good, thanks, Luke.
Our next agenda item is facility operations and agency report.
Training space, and then also some of the successes with the education program and new programming.
Okay, so I'm gonna break this down in two parts. We'll talk about the staffing and things, but first I want to talk about programming. We've been really working hard on our programming. Very positively, we had a graduation last month. What makes this graduation very special is the youth has been with us for 2.5 years. When he came to us, he had no college credits or no high school credits. He is going to be sentenced and going to be leaving us, and he was supposed to leave us in this month. He's actually going to leave us in May, but we did not want him to leave without graduating, so he worked double time. He did class in the day, he did class at night, he did everything, and he was able to graduate in March. So Tim Backus came, we did a ceremony, it was fantastic. His son, the resident son, got to come and see him graduate. We brought his parents, his father too, to see him graduate, so it was very exciting. We are doing a lot of work with our education. My goal is to change the viewpoint of our facility to a facility that provides programming and education, and we do security as well. I am looking to have our sign changed to the Capital District Youth Detention and Education Center to highlight what we do.
And that might be a future board action.
That would be, yeah, we're not doing anything like that today, but that is just an idea I want to put forward to all of you. You know, we did have an article that came out in the Times Union with regards to our educational programming. There will be a new story coming out in Spectrum. Spectrum did come out and interview our teachers and myself, and we talked about the programming we're doing. Our master plan program, which I know I've mentioned before, which comes out of the Chris Wilson Foundation. We did get a grant to operate that. So it's running, it's a 13-week program, and I do have some write-ups on it for everybody here today, so they can see it. It's about Chris Wilson was a gentleman who was incarcerated, and he was incarcerated for life at the age of 16 in Maryland. He did end up getting out after 15 years, but even though he was in, he came up with a plan to move forward. He called it his master plan, how he was going to be successful and move forward in life. And he was very successful at it. He got out, and now this curriculum, we're utilizing it with our youth, our older youth right now, and they're very into it. They get it every week. It's been very popular with them. Chris is actually going to come up for the graduation ceremony from Baltimore to celebrate it with our youth. And then we have also been awarded another session by the Chris Wilson Foundation. So we're going to do another 13-week session in a few months with our kids. So we're very excited about that. And we're doing a lot of work with education, how we can improve things. The virtual head system, their virtual reality systems, we're working with OCFS on those. Very close to completing our tablets for all of our youth. So all of our youth will have tablets access, which will allow them a lot more access to education, and also some entertainment things, but mostly education and religious services and the law library, which they will have access to. So that's very exciting. That should be within the next month. We should have that project up and running.
Did you guys ever advance that program with the Writers Institute?
Yes, so we do have once a week, the New York State Writers Institute brings in a staff to do trauma journaling with our youth. It's been very successful. Our kids have been doing good. Some of the sessions have been very difficult for our kids, so we've had to work with them after the fact, but in the end, it's been very helpful for them to move forward and process some of their trauma and move forward. So that occurs once a week, every Tuesday they come in. Also on the programming side, we have brought in a full-time recreation supervisor. So now we have our rec handled so that we can make sure that we have positive programming throughout the day for all of our kids. So that's very exciting. Talking about some of the stuff that has been going on beyond the audit for the medical, we have also had received the state comptroller. They were in fact auditing OCFS to make sure OCFS was doing what they needed to do. So they came and they spent 9 hours with us going through every single regulation, making sure we were complying with everything that we needed to comply with. We were able to show them everything that we were doing. I hadn't received any official feedback from them yet, but when they left, they said that they didn't have any concerns with what we were doing. So even though the audit was more about OCFS and how they're regulating, it was definitely about us too. So we came out of that, I think, very well. Staffing, we've been continually moving forward with staffing. We have just hired a overnight nurse. So now we have our overnights covered, and we have a evening nurse in the background check process. Mark talked about the increase in pay and how that improved everything. Back in March, we were getting about 10 to 12 applicants a month. Last week, we got 146. Wow. Now they're not all suitable for our facility, but we have drastically brought up our applicant pool. Currently, I have 10 detention counselors in the background check process.
And can you talk a little bit about your strategy to ramp up to where we need to be to operate 39 beds?
So we know March 2025 is where we're going to need to be we're going to have to be fully staffed when that opens up. We have everything going. So I have a plan between now and March 2025 to ramp up. A lot of it you're going to see in December of this year in our budget. But we've already seen some of it. All the administrators on duty that we approved and the nursing. We're getting that in place now because we knew those would be more difficult to hire. So that those would be in place. We're not going to need any more of that. We're going to be all set with that when we get there. Next is going to be clinical staff and some additional line staff coming up in 2024 so that we can ramp up that. So by the time we get to our 2025 budget, we should have already had almost everybody there. So that when we get to 2025 January, we're all trained and ready to go. So that when March opens everything, everybody's ready. So you'll see a much increased staff this year in the budget for 2024. But that's so that we can get there. We had increased our staff dramatically coming into this year. We are making good progress, but we are not all hired. Our goal is to have everybody hired that we had planned by the middle to the third quarter of this year. So that will be where we need to be. Same thing will be for next year.
The question is, are we going to increase county contracts or all the new beds going to be purchased from other counties?
That is going to be something that this.
Yeah,
board's going to-
CDYCI will have to talk about that. You know, our current bed reservations are based on a 24-bed facility. So things that we'll have to consider are, and working with Berkshire, which unit are we going to operate as a female unit? Because right now the 24 beds are just taken in aggregate. But I think we know that the demand for female beds is significant, so the counties may want to consider reservations of female beds. And then also a different strategy, they may want to consider to allocate the bed reservations, because two things. Bed reservations are essentially were established by the counties. They are sort of related to the cost share percentages that were set by the counties. Those are fixed based on the master agreement between the counties. But they may want to consider reallocation of reserve beds to get to 39 bed total, but we have time to think about that. One thing I do want to flag for the board is that our per diem rates in 24, particularly towards the tail end and 25, are going to be high because we're not going to be able to operate 39 beds. We're only going to be operating 24 beds, but we will have the staff 39 bed facility. Right. So we're probably looking at $1,500, $1,700 or something like that. And then once the facility is fully opened and we have youth in the facility, those will start to go down. Do you want to talk about your training space?
Sure. So we're bringing a lot of staff on. We brought a lot of staff on, and what we're noticing is we need to get these staff ready to go on the floor, and we need to train them up, and we need to train them right, because we've looked at some of our turnover data, and some of the staff we've lost just don't feel like they're ready. Obviously, we were at a huge staffing crisis, so we were taking anybody we could get for a while, and that was not, we know that was not the best strategy, but we needed to do that. Now we're making sure we get the right people in, but now we need to train them right. There is no space in the facility to do this training adequately, just because the way our facility is set up. Up in there, the administrative space is very small. And if we're trying to train 7 or 8 staff at a time, it's just not built for that. What we have found is we have a office in 155. Right next to that office in the direct adjacent building, there is a open space, which is a very large conference room space and 2 offices. What we are proposing is to have an administrator there to make sure that they are overseeing all of our training. One of the offices would be a computer lab, and the other office would be for our large trainings, like our TCI training, where we have to have space to do things, our first aid training and large group trainings, so that we can train staff and bring them on right. Now, I do have a proposal. This proposal, the positive thing about it is it wouldn't require any new money into the budget. What we would do is we would utilize one of the positions that we have open, as well as some additional money still there that is underspent in our staffing lines for our administrator on duty position. So there would be no need for additional funding for this year for this budget. And then as we move forward, seeing how everything works, this could be included in next year's budget.
So no net budget increase, so I didn't ask the board to approve a budget amendment because we're just reallocating existing budgeted funds. Once the facility is completed, I think the conference room that will be constructed will be adequate to satisfy the training needs of the facility. So they'll be able to bring that back on site after the construction project is done.
Yeah, for this year and next year, we think this site will be very important, and like I said, bring it online when it comes online. So right now, I think this is going to really help us get staff and keep staff. We're doing very careful analysis of our turnover data. I know that staff oftentimes in the 1 to 3 years, that's where we lose a lot of staff, which is normal. It's the staff that we're losing in the 4 to 7 month range that we think that we need to address. In 1 to 3 months, that's usually because they're just not right for the job. But the 4 to 7 months, that's what we want to address. Now, we don't have a high turnover rate there, but we're starting to see it climb up a little bit. And so that's where I think our training space is going to be. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah.
How many questions so much is it? So this is pretty cool. I didn't get a video of my caseload recently, but the opportunity to return in the foster. She decided to return to the facility because she had bonded with staff. She was comfortable with the team structure, and she just didn't want to bounce around foster homes while things played out. So I think that is a testament to how things are going at the facility. Because this is a young lady that struggled in foster house. So it's just a glowing commentary about how things are going. Because we hear a lot of bad stuff, right? We hear what the state agencies are upset about and these other things, but what the kids see and how they feel about it, I think has to also play a pretty strong role in what this board does. And, I took that to her and I was glad to hear it.
And that's a testament to the cultural shift that I think Joe Mancini started and Luke is continuing. And obviously, as Luke mentioned, they're able to recruit higher quality staff that are willing to, embrace this culture and create that safe, nurturing and educational environment, which is paying dividends to it.
Yes, we have an excellent team right now that's really doing a great job.
Agenda item number 10 is other business.
Any other business?
Can I just add something?
Sure.
Okay. This goes to Luke's comment about the name of the facility. As I've been sitting here thinking through this, I'm glad Bob Bryant is here. The facility has sort of different names depending on what document you're looking at or what sign you're looking at. And I'm just wondering if we could somehow just go through some things. Like we have all these contracts, the original documents, the contracts with the counties, and just see what names we already have in use. I think OCFS has, there's words that change. Certain words used, some say secure, some say don't, some say juvenile.
Right.
So if we could just, not right now, but just kind of go through what we have out there, but what we really should have legally as the name of the facility. And if on signs and stuff, you need a little subtitle, that can be okay too, but I think we should kind of see what we have out there and what we should be using legally.
Yeah, there is a distinction between the name of the legal entity, which is the corporation that enters into contracts, and then the name of the facility. So legally, you're a not-for-profit corporation that has a name, capital T, like Youth Center Inc. And that's something we can't change. And when you enter into contracts, I mean, you can change it, but you got to go through a process to do a name change. The facility is, referenced in various documents. And we can see, how that is referenced. I think it's referenced the same way. But I think the corporation has the ability to change the name of what they call the facility. I would just have to look to make sure we have that flexibility, that it's not somehow in statutory provision or anything like that.
There is some sort of form that OCFS requires. They're willing to provide it. They were on board with the name change. So if this board wants to pursue that, we can certainly work with them to make that change.
Their business. All right, our next meeting date is June 21st at 9 a.m. If there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to close the meeting. Second. Favor? Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Samantha.
Thank you.
Nicely done. How do you turn on?
Better to sit on this meeting.